Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 62 of Third and Wrong. I'm your co-host, Stephen Bolin, and with me, as always, is Austin Dallonga. Austin, let's start with you, my friend. How are things in the hat?
Things are just peachy. Sorry, I'm still laughing from pre-recording, but
We're talking about Super Hornets, so
yeah. So
fun.
staying alive. First, I was fighting the coronavirus, and now I'm fighting the killer bees or killer hornets. So hopefully, this show makes it through 2020.
If it doesn't make it through 2020, it'll be our own fault. Zach, how are things, my friend?
Living the dream as always. And Ozzy, I can't believe you didn't call, we have a new nickname for Stidham, however you want to say it, Super Hornet. So
Super.
We can jump on that, eh?
Oh, no, I still like the Stidhammer.
Oh, my God.
No,
Jarrett, the Stidhammer.
Don't like any of that. Well, First, we'll want to mention, we want to thank Connor for coming on last week for episode 61. If you haven't checked that out already, go do so. It's on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. That was a great interview. And we're going to talk some CFL draft later on. We just want to cover some quick news and notes. But really great insight from Connor, and excited to have him back on in the near future and potentially partner up with a few other things. So thanks again, Connor, if you're listening again. All right, guys. Andy Dalton, the Red Rocket. He has signed with the Dallas Cowboys after being released from the Cincinnati Bengals. As we know, the Bengals drafting Joe Burrow, so the writing was kind of on the wall there. I don't believe Dalton had it in his mind that he's going to stick around. How do you guys like this fit with the Cowboys? Dak hasn't signed his franchise tender yet, so that's important to note. So we still don't know what his future holds. And with the whole coronavirus thing, it's still all up in the air. But Zach, we'll go to you first. I know you're not a big Dalton fan with your years battling him in the AFC North, but do you like this fit with the Dallas Cowboys?
I love it. You're right. I'm not a huge fan of him for the time in the AFC North and the Bengals. However, the guy is talented. He played for a Cincinnati team for quite some time and was very consistent. What I think this brings now to the Cowboys is, I'm Dak, I'm pissed. Like, he wanted to get paid, but at the same token, we've discussed Dak in a lot of different realms with his contract and such, but this is perfect because now it kind of pushes Dak, it drives that price down a bit, just showing that, if Andy Dalton gets in there with all of that talent now around them, CeeDee Lamb and what's his face?
Amari Cooper.
Thank you, Zeke. Yeah, no, I knew. Yeah, Zeke. I knew that one. I was having trouble with Cooper. I think Dalton could really do well. Like, we see what he did with AJ Green and stuff. The guy's an accurate quarterback with really good intangibles. I'm just happy to see him out of the AFC North now and in a position where you could see something like Tannehill again.
Oh, sorry. I guess that goes to me back to me. I thought Ozzy was going to jump in.
just all nod, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, good points, good points.
Yeah, I like this fit. I think Dalton got a really raw end of the deal the last couple of years in Cincinnati. Played with some really bad rosters and then was pretty much a part of a full rebuild with a regime last year that likely and pretty evidently knew he wasn't in the future plans. Like, that was evident as soon as at least Zach Taylor was hired. So I still think he has a little bit left to show. Obviously not a franchise quarterback, but a guy I wouldn't mind giving the keys to with the proper team around him if your starter went down mid-season or something. I think that's a guy you can trust. Ozzy, your thoughts on the Dalton signing?
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. I think that this is a fantastic move for the Cowboys. I think that I was a little taken aback today when Stephen Jones said that Dak would get his contract in due time, but I just saw the headline, so I didn't read too much into that. But I'm hoping that they use this Dalton signing as insurance and treat it almost exactly like Tennessee treated the Marcus Mariota scenario with adding Tannehill. You get two capable starters in there, and you just kind of let this be Dak's last chance to really prove himself. And just, I want to see a little bit more consistency, because last year they kind of played themselves out of a playoff spot Dak isn't all to blame to that, but when you're about to pay this guy $35 million, when you're asking for $35 million a year, you need to be that guy who's going to, at whatever cost, carry your team into the playoffs. And they squandered that opportunity. They had an open road into the playoffs last year, and they ruined it. So
the Eagles were 5-7. Like, it was on a platter for them.
Yeah, I would love to see Andy Dalton come in. I'd love to see Dak on a short leash if in 4 weeks. I mean, this might not be realistic, but I'd love to see the Cowboys be a little aggressive in getting Dalton onto the field. And if Dak isn't playing up to $35 million standard, and let Dalton have some fun out there. Like, I think it was 2015, they were saying on Twitter that was Dalton's best team around him. Now you've got we've been saying this for 2 or 3 years. The Cowboys have a championship roster through and through, ready to go. And you just got to get the quarterback play at that level. I think Andy Dalton's a perfect guy to step in week 6 or something and just take the reins and carry that team to the playoffs.
And the thing with Dak is, like, I don't think he's a bad quarterback. Like, when people hear us rip on him, they assume we think he's bad, or like we think he's Dan Orlovsky or something. I don't know why that name came to mind, but he hasn't been in the league for like 5 years. But like, Dak's a good quarterback, but $35 million a year is elite money. That's Russell Wilson money. Dak is not as good as, he's not in that company, right? Like, Zach released his list, and you could argue Dak maybe anywhere from 10 through 7 on that list, but I wouldn't argue him anything past that. And, you know, like Ozzy, you alluded to, that season last year, I think, fell on 2 people's shoulders, Jason Garrett and Dak Prescott. There is no excuse why that team shouldn't have made the playoffs. That was just an absolute baffling. When Philly lost and went to the Dolphins, the putrid Dolphins, and went 5-7 on the year, I'm like, just give the division to Dallas. Like, it's right there for them. And I don't even know who they lost to down the stretch, but it was just kind of despicable in the way. I'm not even a Cowboys fan, and I'm like, wow. Like, you know,
they lost to the Eagles, didn't they?
They did.
They lost one of the Eagles
that week, actually. I think I was recording at your house, Zach, and I was saying if the Cowboys win that game, I was coming up with this elaborate scenario where they win that game, they could rest starters in week 17 and go to Seattle and body Seattle's cheeks because they were able to. But they didn't. They squandered it. So, like, they played one of the worst games of the year last year against the Eagles in a must-win game. Like, that's not a – I don't care who you are. If you're wanting $35 million a year, Steve, I'm exactly with you. I don't think Dak is bad. I just don't think that he's worth the money that he's asking. And when you have a guy who's a capable starter in Dalton, you don't need to pay him right now. Let him play out the year and see how he does. And if not, you've got Dalton behind to replace him if he sucks.
That about does that. Zach, any last thoughts? I think Zach might be
screen fees, or
I think he froze. Yeah. I can pause the recording here 1 sec.
Steve, go.
Sorry about that. Had a little technical difficulty there. Where were we? Andy Dalton. Zach, any of your last thoughts on Andy Dalton?
No, I mean, like, what I had said was good before, and I agree with what you guys were saying. So
no, say it again.
I'll stat. Well, no.
Okay, so moving on, we have another backup quarterback making headlines. We got Jameis Winston signing a $1.1 million deal with the Saints, and this comes after they gave Taysom Hill over $20 million. I like this deal. I'm baffled that Taysom Hill got $20 million. I don't know if that's guaranteed, but like, that's just. The guy's like 36 career passes. Anyways, this is about Winston. I think this is a fantastic move for Winston and a fantastic move for the Saints. He can learn a lot from Breeze and Sean Payton. He's still young enough where he could potentially be the quarterback of the future there if he really shows enough in the film room and in practice, and if he ends up getting any game time. I'm not sold on Taysom Hill being a franchise quarterback. I think, and if this gets clipped and dubbed and thrown against you for the next 40 years, I'm okay with it. I think Hill is nothing more than a gadget quarterback for the rest of his career. I don't see him being a franchise quarterback. I think if Winston, with his LASIK surgery for his eyes, and can also smarten up decision-making wise, I think this is a great deal for him and the Saints, and I would give him the keys over Taysom Hill if he proves enough this year as a backup. We'll go to you first, Zach. How did you react to this move?
Yeah, I think this is a clear result of what they see in Taysom Hill. Like, there's all those rumors coming out, as you had mentioned, to him potentially being that franchise quarterback afterwards. I think the 20 million goes like he plays a big role in that offense, and he actually creates some really cool looks for them. He's not a passer. He can throw the ball. He's a quarterback, yes, but he's not like an elite passer who's going to come in and be able to throw the ball. If you're going into a playoff situation and Breeze is hurt, I think Winston is a great signing here. It's an interesting quarterback look because, like, when you think of Breeze and Winston, they're not very close in types of quarterbacks. But it's good to have a passer that can learn under those guys now and kind of have that focus as a backup who really needs that schooling. But I think the big picture here is that it shows Taysom Hill, we signed you to this $20 million deal. You're our gadget guy, and you're going to be our gadget guy for the 3 years we sign you. It's not a future quarterback thing here. We are looking for passers who can, when Breeze goes down, come in and be that guy. If they were sure that Taysom Hill was going to develop into that passer, they wouldn't have went and signed someone like Winston and had Taysom as the backup quarterback. But I like the signing. I think it's good for Winston to go see what a great is doing in his final few seasons and how to prepare. So I think it's a bonus for both of them.
Very well said, Zach. Ozzy, your thoughts?
Yeah, I share the same sentiments as Zach. I think that Jameis probably looked at Teddy Bridgewater's situation and said, all right, I could do with that. I could do with 60 million if I can tough it out here. Not to say that Jameis will follow exactly in those shoes, but it's a perfect signing for the Saints where you get a really low risk, high reward contract. If something does happen with Breeze, you've got the passer there and the coaching, hopefully to coach up Jameis's decision making, which wasn't good last year. But yeah, and then if Winston does see play time, then he can work himself up to that big contract like Teddy Bridgewater just did. I think that this will probably be a very much a wait and see approach. If Jameis doesn't get much playing time this year, I could see him coming back on a 1-year deal with the Saints, pretty much just like Teddy Bridgewater did, because we don't know what's going to happen with Drew Brees next year. So maybe this is their way of kind of opening up that relationship with Jameis and possibly being their starter for a year if they don't get a good quarterback in the draft maybe next year. So I don't know. That's my speculation, but I love the move by both sides because you get a really good backup quarterback if need be. Might be a little turnover prone, but like Zach said, if you get in those passing situations, you've got a guy who can do it to go along with Taysom Hill. And then, yeah, at that kind of money, it's like, why not?
Yeah, well, that's pennies. I honestly, I think there's probably like fifth string wide receivers that are going to make more money than him. That's like...
Yeah.
Wow.
And he just threw 5,000 yards
and 33 touchdowns. Yeah.
First overall pick. Yeah, crazy.
And Cam Newton's still unsigned. They're saying that could go into camp and he might just wait for a camp injury or, if someone's certain quarterback doesn't develop as they had hoped, maybe Stidham, then maybe he'll sign in and resume a role there. But it looks like he's putting in the work. He's released a couple workout videos of him, working out. So I hope he gets a job. I like Cam Newton and, we've talked about that at length, so we'll see how that plays out. Marshawn Lynch at 34 years old is looking to make his third comeback with the Seahawks. He mentioned, I forget which interview it was this week, that his agent is talking to Seattle about a potential return. And then John Schneider was talking to another guy from CBS, I forget his name, and he was saying he's not going to rule it out. He said Marshawn's welcome back at any point, but he said nothing's imminent on that right now. But hey, you know what? I made a tweet that said Marshawn could be 45 and just give that man what he wants. Not money-wise, but if he wants to come back. And, I love the locker room presence he has. And things were looking pretty bleak. I remember we were watching that Seahawks-Cardinals game at your house, Zach, and we lost Carson. Penny was already out. And then all you're looking at is Travis Homer as our last back. And things were looking pretty dire. It's like we got to go play San Francisco now, and, we have a depleted roster. But, just the rumor that Marshawn was coming back just, invigorated Seattle as a whole. And, they ended up making it to the divisional round, and he provided a spark. He scored 4 touchdowns in 3 games. His yards per carry wasn't good, but I wouldn't want him to be a bell cow, and I don't think that's what his role would be if he came back. But I'm for it, man. Maybe it's nostalgia, but his locker room presence and his leadership, is much needed. And I'd love him back. Any thoughts on that if he were to come back? Or are you guys saying, or if you were running a franchise, would you not sign him?
For me, it just depends on price and his expectation of his playing time.
Mm-hmm.
You're my goal line guy. If the other two are you quite tired, and you go in there and power yourself in there for a touchdown here and there. I love the locker room as long as he's not at that expectation. I'm going to be the bell cow that I used to be, but I think he's understanding of that. So he is Seattle. When I think of Seattle, I think of Marshawn Lynch jumping in the air, grabbing his crotch into the end zone and way it back and winning the Super Bowl with you guys and such. I think you're right. A little bit of nostalgia, but it invigorates a fan base too. So,
yeah, I think that it's another one of those low risk moves where even if you're not going to pay him like $10 million to come back on a 1-year deal, right? So it's going to be a reasonable contract. And I'm with Zach from a team marketing perspective. This reinvigorates the fan base. Not that they needed reinvigorating per se, but just that nostalgia that you feel, Steve, that's going to be the 12th man. So I totally share the same sentiments as you guys. I think it's I joked about it because you guys miss out on Clowney, but get Marshawn Lynch. So
because good segue, because one guy that's might be done in Seattle and likely done is Jadeveon Clowney. He released a video yesterday. He was working out at his Houston facility, and he said he'd love to be back in Seattle, loves the coaching staff, loves the players, loved everything about the city. But it's been a really weird, like all the conflicting reports coming out. So it sounds like Seattle offered him 15 to 16 million a year. There was reports he was asking for more than 18, but now Seattle has he rejected that 15 to 16 million dollar offer, and now Seattle's went out and signed Benson Mayowa, Bruce Irvin, and they filled out the rest of their roster because they couldn't wait around forever. Because now if you didn't get Bruce Irvin and Mayowa, and Clowney still signed somewhere else, now you're really in trouble. They drafted 2 pass rushers in the draft. And so now it sounds like if he were to come back, it would be at a significant discount. And I don't know. I'm not really mad at Seattle. I think they handled this as best as they could. He was in a tough spot because he couldn't get a physical done due to COVID. He couldn't go to any team's facilities. Those are all locked down. So I'm not mad at the way Seattle handled it. I think Clowney might be at fault here for his own bank account's sake. I don't know what he was looking for. I don't think he's going to get anything more than 15 to 16 million from any other team now. I don't see what team would give him more than that. I think that would be his ceiling, and I'm not sure if he's going to get that now. Seattle might have had the best offer on the table. Zach, your Browns are in the running for him. What are your thoughts on this whole situation and how it's played out? Is Clowney to kind of blame for still being a free agent at this point, or is he just a victim of circumstance?
Yeah, if he's saying 18 to 17 is what he wants, and you guys offer him 16, Miller too short. I felt to get in that situation again where you guys needed him, he would be a big role player in that team. I think it's a perfect situation for him. A guy like me who's a Browns fan, I'm happy that he didn't go there because we are in the discussion of getting him. But I think Clowney needs to step back and understand kind of his value too. He's an injury-prone guy. He's never broken the double-digit sacks. And like you're looking at a guy like Myles Garrett, like who's a lot younger, he's going to demand a bag, not as much injury problems. So where do you rate yourself along those guys? And he thinks he's like a Khalil Mack, and I just don't think he's on that level, and he should be paid on a lower scale and understand that he's not worth that. But the market's going to drive him down anyways. There were a lot of good pass rushers on the market, and that alone after the draft has driven down his market. I think he's going to sign for shockingly a little bit less than that, even like 14 or 13, 14, maybe 15 now when the time comes, because as you can see, teams are a little bit more patient with it, with a guy who's been so injury prone through his career. It wasn't I honestly like how Seattle usually handles their roster. They usually go get good depth from guys later in the draft, or can wait a little in free agency and then get a lot of good, some good sack value out of them and such for pass rushers. But it's on Clowney now. Starting to feel more like a Dak Prescott thing, where I think I'm more valued than I really am. And that does tend, like, I'm not against guys not getting, like, I want them to secure the bag, but you also got to understand the value on the business end on that as well. You got to fill a roster around you, and look at your past to what you can do now. You know, it's an interesting argument.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sorry, I'll let you go in a sec. Just a quick note. Seattle has 21 million in cap, but that's like a misconception. So I see fans on Twitter like, oh, 21 million, like go sign them. But that's not including the Bruce Irvin contract that hasn't been processed yet. And then they still have to pay their draft class. And then John Schneider mentioned in that interview today that he likes having a little money to play with during the season. So if they have to make a deal at the deadline to get that missing piece, you have that money there. So and they might maybe go sign Everson Griffin, who has that connection, USC, where Pete coached him way back in the day. He's 33 years old, but if you can kind of put him in that rotational role with some of the rookies we got, Bruce Irvin, Mayowa, I'm not mad at that either. So I'm not expecting Clowney back at this point, which is sad, but I just don't think there's anything we really could have done about it.
Everson was good too last year, I'm pretty sure. So,
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Your thoughts,
still got
Ozzy?
some in the tank.
Yeah.
Everson Griffin's what, like 31 or something like that?
I think 33, but I could be mistaken.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Still some in the tank. Anyways, as far as Clowney goes, I think what we're going to see at the end of the day is going to be a 1-year prove-it deal at this point. It just kind of seems to be the way that these types of things play out. I don't think that he's going to try to get $15 million for 4 years. I think you'd rather, not to speak for him, but it just would make more sense in my mind to sign that 1-year deal, maybe 12, 13 million, with some guarantees or whatever, or some incentives, but then with the opportunity to maybe play into that 18, 19, even $20 million range in a year from now. So I would say that, but I think him not going to Seattle, I think that's probably fair for you guys. Like you guys have continued to do well with Russell Wilson at the helm and some makeshift guys along the defensive line and whatever the case. So you guys got a good team there. The Browns, I would love to see Clowney with the Browns on that defensive line.
That'd be cool, man.
Oh, baby.
Him and Garrett.
And the Titans were also in the running there at one point. So the Browns or Titans, man, if either of those teams get Clowney, they've got all the tools on defense as far as one of the best front sevens. The Titans have been tooling up there. They just got what's his name from Atlanta, Vic Beasley, who might have a little bit left in the tank, but put him as a rotational guy with Clowney, and oh baby, that would be something. But anyways, those are all my thoughts on Clowney.
I'd have to speak to a Falcons fan, but I feel like I'm just looking at the numbers, and Beasley had like 10 sacks last year, and I think he had like 14 or something his rookie year. Like I feel like the production's there. I'm not sure what the beef is with them, but a lot of Falcons fans were happy when they said they wouldn't be re-signing him on Twitter. So I was like kind of shocked. So I don't know what part of his game is missing, but just looking at the numbers and not really being in tune with his film, I think it's a good value sign for the Titans.
I'd say it was consistency. I think there was some dips, some crazy dips in his numbers from year to year. So of course he plays well on his contract year.
Right. He had a season where he got 15.5 sacks. And there's some weird stat about it being like late in games when it was passing situations every time that he was getting majority of his sacks. And then like the following year after that, after they found the dip, he got like 4 sacks that year. So it was definitely Ozzy, as he said, consistency, but I think there's a lot of things to be desired there with him.
Very fair, gentlemen. Well, that concludes our latest NFL news. NFL schedule, by the time you're listening to this, right now it's May 6th, but schedule's coming out May 7th in the evening. Basically, from what I've read, the first 4 games are going to be out-of-conference games. So, for example, Seattle's matched up against the AFC East this year, so Patriots, Jets, Dolphins, and Bills. So the Seahawks would play their first 4 games against those teams. So in the event that they do get axed due to COVID, they have less importance than like if you were to eliminate a Seahawks 49ers game or a Browns Steelers game or a Patriots Bills game. So something to look for if you're listening to this right before the schedule's released. It looks like the first 4 games are going to be out of conference, and then they're going to structure the rest of the schedule. Being pretty optimistic there's going to be a season, so I'll take it. And that all being said, it's time for Canadian Corner, eh? It's even funnier with video. Love it. You'd love to see it and hear it. All right, guys. So the CFL draft happened last week as we were interviewing Connor McGough. So that was awesome because we were talking about it quickly right after we finished interviewing him, and he was letting me know who the Riders drafted. And so that was a lot of fun. So we spent the last couple of days just reading up on who our favorite teams have drafted and the impact they can or maybe won't make this season. So Zach, we'll go to you first. Your Toronto Argonauts had the second pick in the draft this year. What were some of the selections that they made that make you think they'll be able to contribute this year if there's a season? But let's just assume there is because we're optimists.
Yes, we are optimists. And yes, there is going to be a season because I'm getting freaking fired up for it. So with the second overall pick, I think it was the second overall pick, we got Dejon Brissett. I don't think any relation to Jacoby Brissett in the NFL.
I've seen some jokes on that, yeah.
Yeah. So he's a wide receiver. He stands 6'1", just about 200 pounds. We had some exits in Toronto with our receiving corps, and now receiving corp. And now with new head coach Ryan Dinwiddie there, I think they're trying to tool up. Through this draft, they got a lot of offensive players and offensive tools. So I think they're trying to retool, change, get some younger targets in there who can develop with whoever we decide is our franchise quarterback going forward. Just to let you know a little bit about Brissett. He hasn't had barely any production in the last 2 years. Last year,
wow.
Crazy, right? And he was the second pick, right? So it was kind of I think it's one of those, it's a high risk, but a lot of reward, because when he was playing in 2017, he was an All-Canadian. He caught almost 900 yards. He had, 7 majors on that and like 63 receptions. So the guy was productive when he was playing, but it's that injury the following year, and then he transferred to a new school in the States, and he just wasn't, maybe it wasn't a fit or anything for him, so the production went down there. So I think we're hoping to get him in there, kind of molding him into the receiver we want to see there, and get him as one of our better targets. Then one of the big ones that I really wanted to point out here, actually 2 picks, Theron Churchill. He was also round 1, 9th pick. He actually plays right tackle. Nice. And then we also got Dylan Giffen in round 3, 28th overall. And he played left tackle, but he's most likely to move into the inside of the line. The guy is 6'8", 335 pounds.
Holy.
Yeah, man. Just a bruiser of a player. But most of the reports prior to the draft was he would be built to move inside, which is good because the Toronto Argonauts let up 54 sacks last season, which was second most. So seeing that we drafted those 2 guys makes me happy. The Theron Churchill was actually projected more of a mid-pick, 3rd to 4th round. We took him in the 1st round, 9th overall, but I think it was just kind of one of those, a need we had. And I think the Argos, he was probably just high up on their board for O-linemen, and they're like, let's go get our guy and rebuild that O-line so we can give whoever's starting at quarterback the protection needed so we can get it to these young guys. Not only that, we got a few other gadget players too. Our wide receiver, Samuel Baker, out of Saskatchewan at 48th. I wrote down the exact numbers there because I was going off.
Oh, that's good, man.
And we got Dion, I might butcher this, Pellerin. He's an all-purpose running back. This guy is out of Waterloo and great receiving out of the back, but also had some success running the ball, which in the CFL you're looking for both big time because it is such a pass-heavy league. So that was in the 5th round, 42nd overall. That's good value there, I think, for a guy who can come in and also contribute on special teams. And then we went linebacker. The Argos defense could definitely use some help there. And we went 2 linebackers. We got Jack Kassar, who is a guy who is expected to start in the next few years. Nice. Very good special teams and good development. And then Samuel Achimpong. I hope I didn't butcher that. I am sorry, Samuel.
You're getting an angry email from him.
Yes, I know. Hopefully, please come join us on the pod, though. Yeah. If you do get this, I would love it. Yeah. And then you can get mad at me here. Okay?
I love how every time we talk about somebody possibly roasting them on the pod, we're like, oh, but come on the pod.
Come on the pod and roast us
Join
back,
us.
please. Yes.
Yeah.
This is a rewind. This is a depth pick for our linebacker core and more of a special teams look as well. So I'm actually overall, like, we reached in the first round, but I think they were the guys we wanted, and I'm okay with that. If Ryan Dinwiddie had some say in his offense, what he was looking for in guys, and those were the guys he wanted, then go mold those guys into what you're looking for.
And yeah, like Dinwiddie was the quarterback coach with Calgary, and they've churned out great Canadian receivers over the years. So I'm sure he had some old friends in the Stamps organization to lean on as far as what to look for when scouting Canadian receivers. So I think you can probably be confident that he made a good faith pick there with Brissett. Right. Ozzy, we go to you. We'll stay in the East. Montreal Alouettes didn't pick till the second round. What were some of the picks that stood out to you, and can they contribute right away?
Yeah, so I think the theme for this draft for the Alouettes and Danny Machocha's first draft with the Alouettes, the general manager, that is, they were big swings. I love the potential of this draft. Now it's a matter of if these guys play in the CFL. So our first pick was arguably the best defensive back in the, maybe not arguably either. He was a scout, called him, so it's Marc-Antoine Decoy, defensive back from University of Montreal. One scout called him a once-in-a-decade defensive back, and he was signed as a UDFA, an undrafted free agent by the Green Bay Packers. So he's got a contract right now, but not a lot of commitment there, as we see in the NFL. UDFAs really got to work hard to earn their keep in the NFL. So hopefully, fingers crossed, hopefully he succeeds in professional football. But from Alouette's perspective, he doesn't make it, and he comes down and performs for us, because this was the only defensive back we took in the draft this year, and it was a position that Trevor Harris diced us up in the playoffs last year, as you guys know. 24
straight completions or something like that.
Yeah, 24 or 25. It wasn't pretty.
Yeah.
But let me just go through Decoy's stats here real quick. I'll be really quick. And then, so in his career, he had 94 tackles, 3.5 tackles for a loss, 9 interceptions, a forced fumble, and 2 fumble recoveries.
Wow.
So I didn't write down how many games it was. I think it was 28 games, 9 interceptions. Pretty darn good.
Wow.
Unreal.
Yeah. And his pro day, wait for this, like, these are NFL combine numbers, man. So he's 6'2", 198 pounds. So like a friggin' Richard Sherman type. He ran a 4.35, which would have been the third fastest 40 in the NFL combine. He ran a 6.65 3-cone shuttle, which would have been first in the NFL combine. So he's fast, he's agile, he has got all the tangibles you'd want in a corner, and good length and everything. So this was well worth the risk. He might not play in the CFL, but having a guy's rights like this, like the one scout said, once in a decade defensive back, that just gets my juices flowing. I'm excited right now. Try throwing anywhere on that side of the field, Trevor Harris, next time. I promise I won't go very well. And these 3 guys who I'm going to highlight, our first 3 picks, all nationals. So you're going to get them on the field, and good Canadian talent too. So Cameron Lawson was our second round pick, 16th overall. Defensive tackle from Queens. He played nose. He's a big body, and he's really fast and agile. And I saw some clips of him playing, and he's getting double teamed, but he's so fast that he can get around those double teams, or he can just push through, strong arm his way through the double team. So he was able to disrupt a lot of plays. So he's a real he's described as a high floor player. So not going to hurt when you've got quarterbacks throwing on you like crazy. It's good to have a guy on the defensive line who can disrupt those plays. And yeah, I guess that's really it there. He had 12.5 tackles for a loss, 10 sacks in 32 games. He was a second team All-Canadian last year, so no big deal. And another big swing. So our first third round pick, 22nd overall, Carter O'Donnell was the top offensive lineman in this draft as well. So we not only get the top defensive back, but we draft the rights for the top offensive lineman, and he was. So why not take a chance on the best offensive line prospect in 3 to 5 years? That's how Carter O'Donnell's described as.
Wow.
And so if you get him, he signed a UDFA contract with the Indianapolis Colts. So the word around the league, according to 3 Down Nation, is that it might be a couple years that before he comes back into the CFL. But yeah, if things don't pan out in the NFL again, we've got one of the elite linemen in the CFL. So some solid picks there, big swings, like I said, but to mix in a high floor player like Cameron Lawson and then you got 2 guys who, if they don't pan out in the NFL, you've got some elite talent around this team. That for a young team that excelled last year with the talent on that roster wasn't bad, but obviously could be improved, and that's exactly what we're doing here. So I'm just super pumped. Addressed defensive line a couple more times. We've got Benoit Marion from Montreal. So Danny Machocha.
Yep.
Am I saying that right? Yeah.
Yeah, Machocha, yeah.
He coached at University of Montreal. So he drafted 4 University of Montreal alums, I believe, or 3.
Nice.
So he's got that connection there. And Benoit Marion's one of them on the defensive line. 4th round pick was linebacker Brian Haralimana. I didn't look up too much into these guys. I didn't want to waste too much time. 6th round pick, Andrew Becker. So one of the top interior offensive linemen, or he would have been, but he's battled some injuries last year. So hopefully he can recover nicely and again, get some protection for Vernon Adams. And then 6th round linebacker again, Jersey Henry from Concordia. We get dressed slot in Vincent Alessandrini from Concordia. And then defensive line with Brock Gowenlock. With a name like that, you can't go wrong.
I love to see you as a GM, Ozzy. You're like, cool name, pick him. They're like, what?
Brock
He's a punter.
Gowenlock. If it rhymes, you can't go wrong. And then we address running back with our last pick in Colton Klassen from Saskatchewan. So on the whole, I'm really happy with this draft. As I mentioned, some big swings in terms of guys who might not even see the field, but getting rights for these guys is nonetheless a big step. You got to get the rights to at least get the talent on your team. So I hope that, like I said, I hope they succeed, but succeed in the CFL. Come on.
There you go. Yeah, no, really well done, guys. And if that DB pans out for you, Ozzy, that's huge because you hope Taylor Loeffler can come back from the devastating knee injury he faced, and then if you pair him with that defensive back, like you're laughing.
Oh,
That's a totally revamped secondary. Just you hope he can come back. I think that's 2 years in a row now. He's torn his ACL.
Really?
Loeffler, yeah, he did it once with the Bombers and then once with you guys. So hopefully he can recover from that. And if he can, then watch out. So Saskatchewan didn't have a lot of picks. I believe they traded a few of them. I forget what the moves were, but they had a 1st round pick and they didn't pick till the 4th round. But even that being said, I think they found some great value. So their first pick, 7th overall, they took Maitland Riley out of Saskatchewan, University of Saskatchewan. And I read this was kind of a bit of a reach, but considering Saskatchewan didn't have a 2nd or 3rd round pick, they had to take him there. So I'm not mad with it because this offseason, the Riders lost 2 Canadian offensive linemen, Darius Bladick and Philip Blake, both of the Toronto Argonauts, Zach. So thanks for that, buddy. And then remaining on the roster on the interior, you have Dan Clark at center, who's 31, and then Brandon Labatt, our left guard, who's 33 already. So this guy can just take a couple years, learn the system, really get comfortable with the pro game, which Connor alluded to last week is a pretty big step up speed-wise, and that's from the lineman's perspective. Defensive line, I'm sure it's the same for the offensive line. And then at right guard, we already have Dakota Shepley, who was the 5th overall pick in 2018. And then he missed most of 2018 because he was trying out for the New York Jets. Came back, I believe, mid-season there, and then played almost the entire last season and just been a stud there. So I hope he sticks around in the CFL, because if he does and Riley develops and either stick him at center or guard because he can play either, then that's a pretty good interior lineman to replace Dan Clark and Brandon Labatt, who've held the fort down there for almost a decade. So it's good to have some depth coming in. And, you know, even though he won't contribute right away, I'm just happy that he's there. A quick couple things on him. Canada West All-Star in 2018 and 2019, and a U Sports second and first team All-Canadian the last 2 years. So little accolades to go on his way out of the university level. In the fourth round, the Riders took Kean Schaefer-Baker, which is a sick last name. I love it. And they took him out of Guelph. So we interviewed Ryan Shahan a couple of weeks ago, or probably a month ago now. And so really happy for him. A lot of are saying it's kind of a high-risk pick because he didn't really put up too big of numbers in his college days. But with the Canadian depth the Riders have at receiver right now with Tomac's buddy Mitch Picton and Justin McInnes, I think this guy can come in and compete with those guys. He's 6'3", 205 pounds, so like that prototypical slot back height and size that you want in there. I watched just a little bit of his highlights, and this dude can move. He was making like Odell Beckham kind of catches. Like he has really great hands, really smooth route running, like just really burner of speed. And maybe we can ask Ryan about this next time we get him on, but it sounds like Guelph, even the year before Coach Shahan got there, was really run heavy orientated, which might have hindered his stats. But then in the last spring's East-West Bowl, where they take like all the star prospects and they come in and like, it's like the NFL does the same thing too. It's like the Senior Bowl or something. They come in and he put up 5 catches for 126 yards and a touchdown against like the very best of the best competition in U Sports. So I'm not sure. Again, this guy might not contribute again right away. He didn't even get an invite to the Canadian Combine, their CFL Combine. But analyst Dwayne Ford said he might be the very best prospect that no one is talking about prior to the draft. So, and we got him in the 4th round. So Canadian receivers are always important. You know, the Riders can maybe try to recreate the Canadian Air Force as they did in 2010 with Bag, Fantus, and Claremont and those boys. So you hope you'd love to see it if they could. And then
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
Staying in the 4th round, 35th overall, the Riders go back to Guelph, poach another one of Ryan's guys, linebacker Junior Allen. And I was reading in some forums on this guy that he played end, Mac linebacker, middle linebacker, and DB all in the same season last year. And I'd love to confirm that with Ryan. So I'm just taking this guy's word for it in this forum. And he was a special teams warrior, which the more I read up on special teams, man, like we don't talk about it enough. Like it's so important. You need guys making tackles. You can't have missed assignments down there. And it sounds like this guy you can just put anywhere on the field and he makes plays. When I read that, I kind of thought Isaiah Simmons, like from the NFL, but this guy, a 4th round guy, but I think he can be a stud on special teams. And then you plug him in that Sam linebacker spot, which in the CFL is the linebacker that almost has to be like a DB hybrid because they got to cover that extra receiver in most cases, but they got to know how to tackle too because they're getting in the back and slot back swing routes and everything. Like they got to clean up too. You can't have a shoddy tackler at that position. So at worst, he's depth. At the best, he might be a starting Sam linebacker in a couple of years. So really happy with that. And then I'm going to jump to the 8th round. The Riders selected Neville Gallimore, probably a familiar name for you NFL fans out there. He was selected by the Dallas Cowboys in the 3rd or 4th round last year, or this past draft, sorry.
3rd, yeah.
3rd round. So many are probably thinking, well, this kind of seems like a throwaway or burn pick, but it's the 8th round. And at the worst, you have his rights. So if things don't pan out, kind of like Ozzy said, you hope they succeed. You're not rooting against anyone, but if for whatever reason he finds himself back in Canada, the Riders have his negotiating rights. He comes to camp, and all of a sudden you have an absolute game breaker that you took in the 8th round. And Chris Jones used to do this a lot, but he used to gamble a lot higher picks with this, and then some guys we would never see. But with this one, I think they did it with Cameron Judge. There's rumored that he might go. I think he did end up having an NFL tryout, and Dakota Shepley, another one that went to Jets camp before coming back. So these were 1st and 2nd round picks, but Gallimore's an 8th round pick. Why not? So selection wise, there wasn't a full draft. They had a 5th, 6th, 7th, and a round pick as well, where they drafted a DB, a running back, and another O lineman. So some guys that can come compete at camp, but the names I outlined and mentioned, I think can be contributors right away here. So I was really happy with how that turned out. So all in all, can't be mad at that. Love to see it.
Get yourself the Canadian Football League version of Isaiah Simmons. I mean,
that'd be nice.
I'm taking
full disclosure. I'm taking one guy's word for it, and I'd love to maybe message Coach Ryan about that and see like what this guy brings to the table versatility wise. But I had a big smile on my face when I read that because the Riders just lost. Oh God, what's that linebacker's name? He just signed with Oakland. It's going to bother me now. I can't believe I just forgot it. He was really well known. Moncrief, they lost him to the Raiders, and he was a really great Sam linebacker, very versatile. And so I will miss him, but maybe this Junior Allen guy can step in. Guys, let's talk Canadian quarterbacks. So there's two big names that were being discussed, Nathan Rourke and Adam Sinagra. And so Rourke actually he's from Oakville, Ontario, but he played his college ball in the States for the Ohio Bobcats. And some career stats really quick off the cuff here: 7,454 yards, 59% completion, 60 touchdowns, 20 interceptions with 146.5 efficiency rating in 39 games played. And, he gets taken second round, 15th overall pick to the BC Lions, which I think is the perfect spot for him. He can come in, learn behind Mike Riley. He doesn't have too much competition there. They signed Will Arndt, and who came in from Ottawa, struggled a little bit there, but there wasn't a lot of talent there, so I'm not going to write him off. And then a name that you guys might find familiar, Vinny Testaverde Jr. I don't know if you guys remember Vinny Testaverde. I think he's a quarterback for the Panthers and a few other teams in the early 2000s.
Isn't he a Hall of Famer?
Is he a Hall of Famer? I don't remember.
Maybe that's too much, but I thought that he was.
I don't want to slander the good name of Vinny Testaverde, but his son is now competing for a backup spot in BC. So I think that'll be a cool competition. And it sounds like Rourke's a really good worker in the classroom and everything. So I think that's a great spot for him to go learn behind Mike Riley. I know Zach's not a big fan of Mike Riley's throwing motion, Zach, but I think that'd be really great.
I love his toughness, man.
Yeah, man.
Toughness. And I like his style.
Oh yeah, the top hats, yeah. Better than this visor I'm wearing. Oh, speaking of which.
Yeah, sure.
It's new merchandise that we're not selling yet, so one day. Anyways, the other Canadian quarterback, unfortunately, Adam Sinagra went undrafted, and alluding back again to Coach Sheahan, spoke really highly of Sinagra and said any team that gets their hands on him would be very lucky. Unfortunately, no team drafted him, but fortunately, the Montreal Alouettes signed him as an undrafted free agent. And some of his stats with the University of Calgary: 8,354 yards, 66% completion, 60 touchdowns, 24 interceptions. I couldn't find his efficiency rating. Didn't have it there. That's in 31 games played. So 8 less games than Rourke, put up the same amount of touchdowns, just 4 more picks, 1,000 more yards. Again, Canadian rules to American. But I like that high completion rate, 66%. That's big. And his competition, Aussie, I know obviously Adams is your franchise quarterback in Montreal there, but he'll be competing with Hugo Richard and Matthew Shields, who we've seen a little bit of. But I think the door's kind of wide open for him. Pipkin left. He signed with the Edmonton Eskimos. So I'd be really happy if Sinagra could make that roster. And same with Rourke. I think Canadian quarterbacks are kind of slept on. We all thought there was something there with Brandon Bridge, and it never panned out, which was too bad. But he's actually a RCMP officer going to become one. So that's pretty cool for him. Yeah. And but I'm really happy with how these guys got into some rosters, and I hope they compete and we hear more about them, because I think it's just, like Connor was saying last week, it's good for the Canadian game as a whole.
Did you say, Steve, did you mention that Sinagra won the Heck Crichton Trophy?
Oh, I did not mention that actually. And yes, he did win the Heck Crichton Award for the most outstanding U Sports athlete that season. And I believe Buckley won it the year before him. So Calgary keeps pumping out these really great quarterbacks, and Buckley actually had a job as the Stamps backup before pursuing his medical degree or to become a doctor or something. So good for him as well.
Promise too.
Yeah, he looked really good.
I beat the drum on Canadian quarterbacks. I want them to get their chances in the CFL and develop. They're playing the Canadian game their whole life, man. I want them to get that shot. And as Connor was alluding to, it's hard for these Canadian guys to come up as they're honestly, if you think about it, they're going against these American quarterbacks who their whole career they are praised because you are a quarterback in the American game down in the States. It's a different ball game down there. When almost you look up here in Canada and you take a quarterback who's played that, it's changing, but that second tier game to hockey, the big sport up here, right? And you look at these guys and they're putting a lot of hard work in. They should come in with that. I want them to come in with that confidence that you had the adversity the whole time. Run with the adversity now that you're making a CFL roster, and go and just freaking light it up in the game. Man, I will beat the drum on Canadian quarterbacks. I want to see them succeed so bad. And the more and more we're seeing we're seeing more and more of them be drafted and signed in the Canadian game. I want them now. It's time for them to start tossing it around, showing them what they can do. And
yeah, man,
there's a couple here who are who have the skill set to do it. So
absolutely, I think even Coach Shahan even tweeted, he's like, I can't believe a team didn't draft him. Like they're totally missing out on an absolute baller here, and I hope he lights it up for in Montreal camp and can have a chance to back up Adams and, maybe even find himself in some playing situations too. I think it'd be really cool for him.
Man, yeah, that'd be awesome to see some depth behind Adams just in case.
Yeah. So you're not going to Pipkin, the turnover machine.
God.
And in the CFL,
I'm on the pod, Pip, but that's
come on.
Yeah. Oh, well, maybe not after I just said that. Oh, and we can't forget about Michael O'Connor, who's going to be competing for a spot in Argos camp too, behind Nichols and Bethel Thompson, and Prukop signed with Calgary, so that kind of opens the door for him. I hope he's able to make a roster too. That'd be 3 very significant Canadian quarterbacks that are all vying for spots.
Man, I think we're beating the drum. We love it. We're all here for it. And man, that's the thing in the CFL too. You gotta, for those who did go down and play in the States, they gotta learn that Canadian game. It's not easy, man. There's a lot of moving pieces, to say the least, in an offense.
That's the big misconception, man. They think, any quarterback can just come up here and light it up, but we saw Johnny Manziel fall on his face. We saw Vince Young never take a snap. We've seen Troy Smith, a former Heisman Trophy winner, come up here and do absolutely nothing for Aussie's Alouettes, much to his dismay.
Wow.
Oh, God.
Yes.
I'm so ready for the next one, man. The next great Canadian quarterback is what I'm ready for, man.
That is
what's Mom, can you close the door? Oh, the dogs are getting bathed right now. Just for reference, holy crap. I am deceased. I unmute for 0.5 seconds.
Anyways, we've seen time and time again American quarterbacks come up to the CFL and there's a lot of CFL hate out there, and maybe not even hate. I think just maybe misinformation. And I get fired up and passionate about it, but I got to just calm down and come down and be like, okay, so and just provide data and examples and be like, look at these people who have come up and tried to make it in the CFL and couldn't because the game is different. And to succeed in the CFL is its own success in its own way because it's a different game. The field is so wide. I remember people thinking Tebow could come up here and play it. I'm like, I don't know if I can see Tebow floating one of his passes the width of the field on a hitch route or something, or a screen. So
Newton, let's see Newton.
Cam Newton, baby, yeah.
I think that one bothered me the most is the Tebow one because it's such a passer. I love Tim Tebow. That's no hate against Tim Tebow.
Time, baby. Yeah.
Like he would come in and have he could be that what's his name out of Winnipeg there.
Chris Streveler.
Thank you, Streveler style, which would be really cool. But to be consistent in the CFL, you got to have an arm on you, man. Like the field is so much bigger. You have like I said before, a lot of moving pieces. It is not an easy game for those listening who are more accustomed to the American game. Take a look at the CFL, watch pre-snap and all the pieces that have to happen correctly, and to get a solid running game. There's just so much different aspects to it, and it's a fun game to watch too. So
absolutely.
Well, I think, if there is a league this year, season, we will be. We might be doing another amateur agency CFL game, and that would be,
action.
We talk about how good the CFL game is. Man, there's no better one than that one that we went to. And that's
killer.
Holy heck!
I love how that
comeback.
I love how that played out too. We're trying to pick a game on the calendar to do that promotion and the ticket giveaway. And we're like, oh, let's do this one. It's Aussie's favorite team. It falls on a weekend. We're all free. Ends up being an instant classic. What if the game was 9-6 final? I would have been like, yeah, everyone had a good time. But we just witnessed an absolute miracle, and we're all just sitting there dumbfounded. I'm not even a fan of either team, and I was just like, what an experience. What an experience,
football.
Man.
Yeah. Oh.
So if you're listening to this and you're just like, I listen to the pod, but I'm not really a CFL guy.
Give it a try, man.
Yeah,
I've given mushrooms a try. Still don't like it, but at least I tried it. Anyways, comparing the CFL to mushrooms. That's a bad comparison.
What kind of mushrooms?
Yeah, what kind of mushrooms there, Steve?
Sauteed in a little garlic and butter.
Legal,
sorry,
like
pretending
grocery
I'm
store ones.
Like grocery store mushrooms.
Oh.
Your face. Yes.
I'm so naive, man.
Holy
my God.
crap, your face. That is priceless.
Yeah. You guys are just like, what kind of mushrooms? I was like, oh, the ones you're cooking them up.
Saute. Yeah.
So the grocery store ones, he says, just innocently.
Yeah. You can find me on Twitter at SteveVolin22. You can find me on Instagram at SteveVolin_. Ozzy, where can the fine folks find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at AustinPaul_. It's Austin with a Y, not an I. Wait.
Zach, where can the fine folks find you?
You can find me living the dream on Twitter at Zach Foth or on Instagram at ZachFoth_. No at the front, or I guess, Zach Foth_ on Instagram. Thank you very much.
We're just a bunch of, we're just,
Went off the rails at the end here, but hey, you love to see it and hear it. For those curious about the Canadian game, message us, DM us. We're happy to talk CFL if you're curious about how the rules are different. And then check out our interviews too, like Marcus Chunky Adams, Andy Fantuz, Coach Ryan Shahan, Connor McGough last week. Even our interviews with Nick Kowalski, journalists Nick Kowalski and Danny Austin. Like, these guys are just full of knowledge, and you'll learn a lot more from them with us interviewing them than you will just from us, period. So, and you might get less mushroom talk. So unless you like that, then we'll keep doing it. But anyways, check those out. Check this episode out. Share us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Check out our YouTube if you're watching. Thank you. And keep supporting. Godspeed.